So how can you control your anger and not allow your anger to control you? The problem that most people have with anger is not so much the anger itself, but it's their misconceptions or beliefs around anger. For instance, many people have the belief anger is bad and it should be suppressed. As a result, they suppress their anger, and then that leads to passive aggression, resentment issues, or eventually they end up exploding and having an outburst later. In other cases, people feel like when they're angry, they have to express it right away. This is also a misconception. Just because you're angry doesn't mean you have to give vent to this anger, express it right away. Some people say you need to hit a pillow or yell like a bear. All of that is lunacy. That is not what you must do when you feel anger. Another example of a misconception is other people make me feel angry. No, other people are not making you angry. You're angry based on your perception of matters, and you have control over your actions. And I'm going to teach you how to be able to control your anger. Some people feel like anger is the only way they'll be heard or respected, so they express themselves with anger and they become loud and boisterous because they don't know how to be assertive. They just know how to be aggressive. And they think that maybe they'll get the respect through the intimidation, but that doesn't last. In other cases, people feel like they shouldn't feel angry if they're a good person or if they're a Christian or they're a calm individual. That's a misconception. And other people feel like if they let go of their anger, then they're actually letting the other person off the hook for what they did. A lot of our anger comes from a place of righteousness, feeling like we're right and the other person is wrong. And then we're getting road rage and line rage and rage everywhere because we constantly see people doing things that are wrong or treating others or ourselves in an unjust manner. And anger means I'm out of control is another misconception. People feel like if they experience anger, then that means that they don't have any control and that they're being reckless. That's not the case. Everyone experiences anger. It's a part of our default programming. So to understand that default programming better, I want you to think about a sophisticated house that has very sensitive documents in it. Let's pretend this is your home. And so you get a very high-tech security system. And the security system has multiple functions to protect your house. It has lasers and infrared and security cameras and intercom systems and very loud sirens, and it has the ability to call the police, and it comes with private security, and it's got all of these different mechanisms. But one mechanism is what we'll call the nuclear option. It's a fail-safe where if all else fails and people get in and they are getting access potentially to these sensitive documents, there's a self-destruct function. So the security system will actually just blow up the entire house and everyone that's in the house in order to protect your sensitive documents. Now, although the system has this option, how often would you want it to use the nuclear option? You might be thinking rarely to never, and that would be correct. Likewise, when it comes to your nuclear option, which is anger, it is something that you would actually want to use rarely to never. Anger is only adaptive. It is only effective. It is only appropriate in very rare, specific situations. A situation where you would want to have the nuclear option is when you have to protect yourself from a physical attack or your family from a physical attack, like your children, your wife. This is because the nuclear option of anger is very powerful and potentially dangerous and destructive. You're getting a very large surge of hormones like adrenaline, which is making you stronger, faster, able to jump higher, and cortisol, which is a pain reliever. So you can literally fight better when you feel anger. So understand, you don't need that all the time, because in your day-to-day life, 99% of the time, you're not in an actual physical fight. You very rarely actually need this function of anger, but it's there. So when it gets triggered, we have to know how to diffuse that and how to talk it down to use the other options that are available. Your anger is a secondary emotion, which means that there's always base emotions beneath the anger that could be dealt with and should be dealt with. Feelings such as extreme sadness, frustration, humiliation, pain, psychological pain, confusion, even boredom. Anger is used as a secondary, more stronger display. It's a puff of bravado to show other people that you're not vulnerable when really it's being triggered by very vulnerable emotions. So anger is the less vulnerable display, so that you can hide the fact that you're actually experiencing very vulnerable, very painful emotions. So you need the ability, first of all, to be able to pause when you're not in an emergency situation, which is most of the time, and analyze, what am I really feeling beneath this anger? Because we like to show anger, but again, it should rarely to never actually be used. Now, does this mean we should be suppressing anger? No. Giving yourself the time to pause and to think and to allow that adrenaline and cortisol to move through you without acting on it is not suppression of anger. It would be just like an abuser saying, what am I supposed to suppress my anger when my wife makes me mad and not hit her? No, sir. It's not about suppressing your anger. It's about controlling your actions. A feeling is not the same as an action. So you have to be able to separate that. So it's your job to give yourself the pause, 45 to 90 seconds, and allow the chemicals to move through. And when you're in stop, stillness, thoughtfulness, observance, patience, then you're able to think and analyze, okay, what am I actually feeling beneath this anger? And also let me think about how I could handle this in a way that would be effective. And you'll realize the most angry response when you're thinking it out will be the response that will lead to regret, hurt, pain, and you having to apologize later, which could be terrible considering you may be the one who's being offended in the first place. Does that make sense? So again, by pausing, you're already winning the game and controlling the emotions. Your anger, by having the right belief system around it, instead of all of the misconceptions of, well, if I suppress it, it's bad, or I need to show it. No, you need to recognize the one truth of anger, which is that it's a nuclear option only to be used in very extreme circumstances. Now, are you saying there's no good uses of anger? What happens as trauma survivors are slowly becoming more conscious, they may get access to anger and then realize, hey, this helps me to set boundaries. And that's good because anger can have positive uses, but not in its uncontrolled state. Only when we harness the power of anger and use it in a very controlled manner, what it gives us is determination. So you want to think about how gasoline is an explosive. If you don't control the way you take a flame to it, it can literally explode in your face. But when you put the gasoline into an engine that uses a fuel injection system, then it slowly burns the fuel, which allows the fuel to be used in slow combustion to allow an engine to move. Likewise, people have discovered that they can take anger and instead of just allowing it to control them in the moment, they can hold on to a little bit of it, put it in their back pocket, and use it as a slow burning fuel of determination. So you can tap into a bit of anger when you do need the strength to speak up and defend yourself verbally. But again, this would only be a little bit of anger. It's very properly used in sports because you need the adrenaline. Famously, Michael Jordan would think of a situation that would make him angry. Or when you're working out, it gives you that extra bit of adrenaline so that you can lift a heavy object. These are adaptive uses of anger. So yeah, you can put it in your back pocket. You should always have a little something there that you can tap into. But no, you should not use and default to anger in an uncontrolled way in your day-to-day life. Rare to never.